Um, well, Dominic, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. Let me introduce myself. My name is Marcos, co-founder of Find Your Flouu. I'm here with Dominic Pratt, which is the president of the Cow Salon division. The best, and I'm being biased, because I love the industry and my experience at Cow has been incredible because of the salon community. I must say that is one of the industries that remains as as its core very pure in terms of connection, meaningful connections. That is what it's all about. So I had the privilege to experience that here at Cow, and I must say it's the best thing that I've ever experienced, because from a human point of view, it's very human, very warm, very genuine. So yeah, I'm also grateful for you taking the time. You're the top of the tree of this division, and you're taking the time to have a sit down with me. I was hoping for this to be face to face, but technology can be useful when we cannot meet in person. So also grateful about that. I'm going to start with our intention. Why are we here? And then we are here sat together because we hope this moment serve as a support or inspiration to another human being, based on what we would be discussing today. Today, we have a focus, and our focus is men's health. In June, there's a week in which we are going to be, elevating the awareness of how important it is for men to look after their health in general. And of course, Find Your Flouu is all about getting the support that you need to look after your mental health. So thank you, Dominic, for taking the time again, for being here. I must say that it's going to be perfectly imperfect. There is no so much preparation behind the topic. I just gave Dominic a brief, but it's very open to be discovered. And the objective is also for this to be spontaneous, for us to also get to know each other better. And and yes, that's it. So
Okay,
I'm not
sounds
going.
great, and it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I mean, I have a lot of different experiences, and if sharing those is helpful, then I'm more than happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you very much. But before we jump into that, Dominic, if we can quickly go through your story, because uh, everyone within corporate, well, I must say, vast majority of people within the corporate spaces, when you do a job, you always look for a reference in terms of like, okay, how this person, eventually got there. And of course, you are, our leader, the president of Chaos Salon division. And I guess it would be interesting for people to know, like, how did that happen? If we can very quickly, 5-7 minutes, go through that journey that suddenly took you to be where you are today, living for me the most beautiful division or community, call it that way, in the world. But yeah, if you can tell us, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Sure, and I do have an unusual path to my current position. I have to say, it's not the usual pathway. So I'm actually a chemist, so a scientist. I'm from the UK originally, so I studied in Sheffield chemistry. Did my PhD in Sheffield, and then I joined Procter and Gamble probably in 1995, so 28 years ago, so a long time ago. Um, that was interesting. I mean, the pathway of where you end up is there's often a lot of sort of randomness, a lot of just luck sometimes. So I remember when I was in doing my chemistry PhD, it was sort of dye stuff synthesis and kinetics and things like that. So when I joined P&G, they hadn't told me what I'd be working on, and so you turned up on the first day. It was like going to the first day of school almost. You didn't know anybody there. You had no idea what you were going to be doing, which department you'd end up in, and they put me in the hair dye project. So I thought, oh, they obviously looked at my background and saw that I'd done dye chemistry and thought this is the right category for him. But they hadn't. It was just pure luck. They hadn't looked at my CV at all. They hadn't looked at my background. I just ended up purely by luck in the hair dye, and I stayed sort of. That was the start of my journey into sort of hair color and the whole salon business. So I stayed with P&G for about 5 years, and then I got the offer to move to Germany and join the COW R&D organization, so the research and development organization. And they were purely sort of the salon industry, so supporting, developing all the products, working with the marketing team for the salon business for COW, and that was based in Germany. So at the time, I never imagined I would move to Germany. I remember when I was at school, I took German at school, and I gave it up after a year. I was terrible at it, and I thought, well, I'm never going to need German. So I gave it up, and then of course I landed in Germany. I didn't know anybody, couldn't speak a word of German, and thought maybe I shouldn't have given up German at school. So anyway, I mean, I had a long career there in research and development. I worked in that group for about 18 years, and I started off in basic research and technology development, moved into product development. Then I took responsibility for all of R&D with all the different functions within R&D. Did that for 18 years, and then I got offered a 2-year assignment in Japan to move and lead the skincare research and development department there in headquarters. So again, it was one of those things, never planned to move to Japan, but I thought, what an offer. That could be a really cool thing to do. It was a bit unlucky because it was exactly the time that COVID hit. So I ended up sort of stuck on the other side of the world. My wife didn't make it over before they closed the border, so she was stuck in Germany. I was stuck in Japan. Couldn't speak Japanese. We weren't allowed to leave our apartments. All the restaurants were shut. Everybody was sent home. So it was a very challenging time to try and run a new department where you're new to everybody there. No chance to meet anybody in the group, and we had to try and find our way and work together and keep things going. So that was a really interesting experience for me. And then in sort of July 2001, sort of Japan, headquarters said, you probably need to go home now, because I was also looking to get home. That's a long time to be away from home and away from family. And so they said, well, we have a role in the business side if you're interested in that. So I said, well, why not? I mean, it's the salon business, so I know the salon business really well. If there's one department or one category where I could maybe make that jump from research and development into business, it would be salon. I knew a lot of the people already, and so I said, okay, fine, let's do it. Let's try it. That's the other thing I've learned. Sometimes you just need to do these things. If you think too much about them, you end up coming up with all these reasons why you shouldn't do it, and then you never do anything. So a lot of the time I just follow gut instinct. So I said, fine, let's do it. A new challenge. I'll learn a lot. What's the worst that can happen? And so I've been in this role now for nearly 2 years. So it'll be 2 years in July. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of work. Because I'm trying to run it at the same time that I am learning. So that's not an easy thing to do in a completely new area, but I really enjoy it. So that's my journey. It is unusual. I sort of really a scientist. I'm still a scientist at heart, but having to split my mind into more of a business thinking way, and that's been a real challenge. And these things are always, the tougher they are, the more you develop, the more you learn. So
totally.
that's the way I look at it.
Dominic, it has been an amazing start, because reflecting on what you were saying, you're a scientist, but you started saying that sometimes life is all about randomness and luck, which is amazing, because I have some friends that are scientists, and they're very like pure like science, but it's incredible to get to hear from you that also that side that we all know as humans, that element of randomness, luck, also help you to get to where you are today. It was not purely planning or purely like do this and this and this and this until this eventually happened. And I think that's already an amazing learning for all of us, and a reminder that we can plan a lot, but I think that at the end life also happens, and it has its randomness that can lead you to some places where you probably never imagine, or I don't know. For example, you go to Japan, and then you also experience things such as like your wife being stuck, here, and then you being there, lockdown, not being able to leave the apartment, and it was horrible for everybody. But you also had that extra challenge of, oh my God, like I just moved to a new country, then this happened, and then my partner is in the other side, and then there is lockdown, isolation. But then also beautifully, you then had the opportunity to come back, and then now being the president of this division, and it's incredible, really, what you have just shared with us, especially when looking at your background. Like you're a scientist, and then you're sharing all of this. One thing that I want to share with everybody as well, which also tells me already a lot, about you. And I told you this already, Dominic, but it's the fact that when I reach out to you, to Dominic, uh, I didn't really feel nervous or super scared because I'm reaching to the president of the division. I did feel like that in other companies, where I was like, oh my God, like rereading the email like 10,000 times just to send like a praise to the CEO or to someone, which makes me, very comfortable to get to have this conversation with you, and just thank you for allowing me and people that are close to you to have the space, and the safety, let's put it that way, to reach out to you, and 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 then if I wouldn't have felt that, I think probably this wouldn't have happened, this moment, because I would have felt so like insecure, rereading 3,000 things, that I would have ended up not sending you an email saying like, hey, would you like to be part? So for everyone to know, this is how this happened. I just simply sent a note to Dominic, and he kindly accepted. And I never felt any pressure, or, oh, am I doing the right thing, the wrong thing? Maybe he's super busy, which he is, but so yeah, just wanted to for everyone to know, which I told you already, Dominic, but that's the truth. I always felt that sense of safe space, or not too much like overly different, even though of course you are the president of the division.
Well, it's
Okay,
always
so
always been my
yeah.
approach that I mean, for a number of aspects. I mean, one, I've also worked in all sorts of positions throughout my career. So I mean, I understand perfectly that you don't want to be nervous when you're talking to people higher up in the organization. And the other thing is that, if I create barriers with people, then they don't really tell me the truth. So it's much harder to do my job if people aren't really telling me what's going on. They're telling me what they think I want to hear, for example. Then it's much, much harder for me to do my job. So I think not having barriers between, any levels in the company, I think is extremely important, because, it helps all of us do a better job.
Thank you. Bueno, I guess like you live by that, and I can confirm because I have experienced it myself. So
I live and die by it. Sometimes it doesn't work out in my favor, but it's 90, 90, 10, 90% of the time it works out. Sometimes you end up, it not working out for you, but that's the same with every approach.
everything. Okay. Well, we cover your background, which is very interesting. We already got a lot, out of it. But then moving into that part of your journey, specifically around men's health and mental health, if you feel comfortable, talking about it. If you can tell us more about that, because as you were going through your journey, you changed from PNG to CAL, then you moved to Germany, where you had to learn the new language. I can relate because I moved to the UK, didn't know how to speak English, so similar. Then you went to Japan, completely new country. Lockdown happened, your partner got stuck, and then of course the pressure of the role and everything else. Obviously, that triggers some clues in my mind. Okay, maybe this must have been hard, but I don't know. You tell us, in your journey, what you have experienced, whatever you feel comfortable sharing regarding that topic of men's health, mental health, how to look after yourself, X, Y, Z, whatever you want to share, we are here to hear. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think mental health and physical health is somehow intertwined, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I've always, I mean, I've always been crazy about sport. Even when I was a 10-year-old, I used to do track and field. I loved it. As I sort of grew older, I started doing 10Ks. I did marathons, then I started doing triathlons. I've done Ironmans.
Oh.
So I've always used sport as a sort of balance to sort of the stress of work. And I've always found it works really well. For not only is it a balance, but sometimes I had my best ideas when I was doing sport, not when I was sitting, chained to my laptop or chained to the lab or the desk. It was often when I took a break, went for a run, and then suddenly, you had an interesting idea, or you had a more creative sort of thought about how you would do things. So I've always used sport as a balance, a counterbalance to the stress, which is a mental health thing. It's of course it's a physical health thing as well. I like to be fit. I try to keep myself fit. I think it's important. But it also is a mental health balance. I think, if you just have work, and we all know work permeates every minute of the day. Even if you're not working, you're thinking about it. You're thinking about that problem that you haven't been able to solve, or you're thinking about some pressure situation that you need to get through. So it's always there, and I think that the sport was a great way for me to and I think for everybody to really balance that out. So sport and physical health and mental health for me were always very intertwined, and I always used both as a counterbalance to each other. I did do sport very competitively. So I mean, I've qualified for the UK in triathlon for amateur level, and I love that competitive part, which also is something that's driven me in work as well. But I think one of the things I sort of wrote down eight things that I think are really really sort of important in terms of health generally, whether it's physical health and mental health. And as I say, I see two sort of sides of a coin, and that are very much related. But on the work side, for me, it's always been about, does it challenge me? Do I have a passion for it? And that makes everything easier. I think if you do have, we all have stress at work, but it can be, especially when I moved from R&D to the business, this sort of pressure is constant. It's I always thought R&D was tough, and it was a lot of pressure, a lot of work. And then I moved to the business side, and it's just constant. I mean, you're responsible for all the business numbers. You're responsible for all the people who work in the company. I mean, it's really a big pressure, and it's on your shoulders 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and it is just constantly there. So I think you can only really survive that if it's challenging you, if you feel that it's developing you, but also if you have a passion for it. And I think that's where you talked about the salon business. It's not for everyone, that's for sure, but I'm sure we have a similar sort of connection there, that this sort of almost archaic industry, where it's still based on relationships, still based on people talking and trusting each other. Something that has almost been wiped out in a lot of other industries, but that's something I have a lot of passion for. It's something where you directly see the impact that we as a company have supporting stylists or salons or whatever it is, or whoever it is, our customers. You see it, and you don't see that in a lot of industries. So I think whatever you do, if it's not challenging you and you don't have a passion for it, it's going to be a much harder slog than if you do see it as a challenge and a passion. The second thing I sort of noted down was, and we talked about it, or I talked about it already, was just having a balance. For me, it was sport, and I like sport because it's got that physical benefit, but it also has that balancing out the mental stress that you have on day-to-day work. So whether it's a hobby, as I say, I like sport because it has multiple benefits. But you have to be careful. I mean, I had periods where it wasn't the work I was burning out on. It was the sport I was burning out, because I was doing, 12-hour a day job, and then trying to do, train for an Ironman with whatever that was, 20 hours a week of
Wow.
sport. And I was burning, it was a sport that was burning me out. So, I mean, you have to be careful. You have to sort of balance these things out and not get too obsessive about either. I mean, they need to balance each other out, but it needs to be fun. I mean, if your balance for work isn't fun anymore, then you're in trouble. So I think from a mental health point of view, this burnout, and you see it more and more. People disappear for months with burnout, and it's a real problem. I mean, it's one of those things people don't like to talk about because it feels like a sign of weakness. But it's not. I felt it myself. I mean, and if you don't listen, and that was sort of the third point I had, was you've got to listen to your body and your mind. If you don't, if you ignore the signs and you keep going, it won't work out for you. So, I mean, one is just, burnout, but I notice now I'm 51 now, so age, I can't do the things I could do at 20, and I shouldn't be trying to do the things I was doing at 20. At 20, I could train 20 hours a week, and I could work 12 hours a day, and it was fine. I can't do that now, and I have to understand that, and it's hard. It's hard. I'm a very competitive person. I don't like to admit that I can't run as fast. I can't do as much training. I can't, do the things that I could do 30 years ago. So I mean, and also remote working has changed. We sit in chairs hours on end. I never used to do that. And that's a different stress on the body as well, the back and all the muscles in the shoulders and the neck. And, those are other things, the way we work has changed, and just responsibility, it's the responsibility as you progress through your career, the responsibility gets more, pressure gets more, the stress gets more. So, all these things change over time. And I think those are things you really need to listen to your body and adjust to. And, I've adjusted my sporting career. I've sort of, okay, it needs to be fun. It needs to be a compensation, but I shouldn't be trying to win races with people 30 years younger than me. I mean, that's just going to lead me into burnout again. So,
and I guess, sorry to interrupt, Dominic, it must be difficult because you have been, growing up with this element of being super competitive and doing this triathlons, and then, back to your word of balance, I guess in like that moment of reflections and accepting that, okay, like maybe now I need to tune it down a little bit because of I don't want to experience burnout, but thank you for sharing that you also experienced that. It must be hard, to really like to go through that element, especially if you have been growing up like that, in that spirit of being competitive, not only in sport, also not only in work, also in sports, which is another psychological thing that you really want to get into it, and also gives you energy, because when you do sports, I guess you gain a lot. So thank you for sharing. I just wanted to make a pause to say thank you for the fact that you share that you experience burnout and balance, which is so important but so difficult to attain, is something that you have experienced in the journey. But I'll let you continue. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I see a lot in other people. People typically who are very, very ambitious and very competitive in their career tend to be quite obsessive and competitive in everything they do, and that's often where the problems start. I see a lot of people that they start getting completely obsessed with sport and start going way over the top, and then you're losing all the benefits that it should be bringing to you. It's not fun anymore. It's actually having a negative effect on your mental health, a negative effect on your physical health. So being able to let go and say, look, I need to get the balance right here, is not easy. And, I stopped doing competitive races, and just focused on having fun training. I moved a lot from high impact sports, like, doing a lot of running, to maybe more swimming and cycling, where the impact is a lot lower, and you can carry on, even in your 50s, 60s, 70s to do those sports without, getting injured or getting, too obsessed with them. They're just better sports as you get older. So, I mean, adjusting what you do, how you do it, how much you do it, I think is a really key one, and it's been a hard lesson for me. I mean, it was a really traumatic transition from letting go of being super competitive, of being, wanting to do every race and try to, be as close to the front of that race as I possibly could. And then I started to notice, A, it wasn't fun anymore. B, I wasn't getting the balance. It was, if anything, it was sort of adding to all the stress and the pressure that I already had at work. And you just started to get injured, and you started to notice that the body is not the same as it was when I was 20 or when I was 30. So I mean that's definitely one. Listen to your body. The next one I had was just making time for partners. I think it's super important. Family, friends. I mean, they're also a sort of a counterbalance to all the stress and the responsibility and the pressure that we often feel in our working careers. So, and for me, it was always really important. My wife also loves sport, so having that sort of common interest, that when I do the sport and it, get all the benefits of it, I can do it with my wife, which is great. I mean, that's amazing. So I mean, but not everybody can manage that their hobby and what they do in their free time matches perfectly what their partner or their family can do. But certainly making time to spend time with other people who have nothing to do with work and nothing to do with your daily pressures, and just listening to them for a while can be really sort of, almost like recharging the batteries for me, that you realize the world doesn't stop and start with with your pressures and your problems. So I think that was number 4. Related to that, number 5 was about recovery time. That was the other thing I learned, that it's you do need time, even if it's just an hour a day. And I started doing that, just an hour in the evening, doing nothing, just turning the brain off, turning the body off. And maybe you watch TV, or maybe you just go for a walk around the block, or maybe you do something, but something where you can just disengage your brain, disengage the body, and just recover. When I did do sport at a high level, you do learn quickly that the training for competitive sport, it's like a curve. You have to stress the body, but then if you don't take enough time to let the body recover, you don't get any benefit from that stress. So this they call it sort of super compensation. So you stress the body over the comfort level, but then you have to take the time to recover, and then your body comes back stronger, and you can increase then your speed or your strength or whatever it is you're looking to do. And you need that in life as well. If you don't take those moments to let the body recover, let the body, recharge the batteries, you're just always on a downward curve. You're just emptying the batteries constantly, step after step after step. So I mean, that was another advantage for me, to sort of understand how the body works through sport, and then you can reapply that to work, and understand that recovery is extremely important, and if you don't do it, it's just a regression. You just, bit by bit, your your capacity, your capabilities, your thinking power, your concentration, it just ebbs away. So that's something I've actively done, which in my 20s I never needed it, and then in the 30s I started to notice, okay, you need to do this. So, and it started in sport, and then I realized you need it in life as well.
But thank you for sharing. Sorry to interrupt, Dominic, because it's so, sometimes it's not very intuitive, because we are on this like, oh no, we need to overachieve, and then we smash this presentation, then what's next? But back to your point, when are we actually taking time, after we did all that sprint of preparing for, this strategy for next year, or the big thing that you had to deliver? We usually don't tend to stop.
No.
It's like, oh, now it's time. You're like, I'm going to take it easy, and then just going to, I think that moment of reflection of like, oh, I pushed my heart so fast, and it went well, and it's great. What's next? Or what's we don't, naturally come back to what you just mentioned and say like, oh, it's time to rest.
Yeah.
You just have done this super sprint. We are very powerful, but we are, limited in our, energies. We need to recharge. So thanks for sharing that piece of wisdom, especially, you know, uh, 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 for everyone, to be honest, but especially for the young people that are just starting with their career, that you feel that, oh, I can everything. And yes, you can everything, but doing it that properly. If there is no the need to rest, if there is no time for rest, back to your point, it's not going to happen because it's a cycle. But
Yeah.
we don't tend to look at it. We look at you know, the straight line, and no. But thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, and just look at the really, really top sports people. I mean, when they train hard, and then they go home and they sleep. They eat, sleep, and train. That's it. And the sleep is almost as important, if not more important, than the training, because
Mm.
again, it's this thing that of the cycle. So if they don't sleep,
Mm.
then all they're doing is just building up and building up the stress on the body, and that's not a recipe for success. So
Mm.
these top sports, triathlon is a good example. They get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they go swimming, and then they go home and they go to bed till 11. Then they get up at 11 and they go cycling, and then in the afternoon they go back to bed, and then they'll do the run in the evening. So and without that sleep in the middle, I mean, it sounds crazy to us. We're all working
I
hard,
didn't know that.
but that's how they do it. Yeah, and without that they wouldn't be able to reach the levels that they reach, because without the recovery there's no benefit from the stress that they do during the training. So and they also do it cyclic. They do 3 hard weeks, and then they have a week where it's really, really easy, and that's this recovery. That's the sort of the super compensation recovery area. But they're the ones that win the races. They're the ones that win the Olympic gold medals. The guys that really know how to recover, as well as do the hard training. The sporting world is littered with people who know how to train hard, but they don't win anything because they never recover, and therefore they never really get to the top of their capabilities. So there's a
Dominic,
lot to learn from sport.
let's learn. No,
Before it's
as you
been
were as you were going through, I was thinking like, wow, like why, also how we can potentially within the workspace also value that time of recovery of someone else, like, because we tend to look at, okay, what needs to get done, and da, 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 da. And I personally, some years ago, I didn't feel quite confident when I was on holidays, when I was about to take holidays, because I felt like, oh, I should be on top of everything. But back to what you're sharing with us today is equally important. So how we create that space, like, oh, this human being, even myself or whoever, need this time, to recover, so she or they can come back to that element of sprint, or high training. But I think that's not, I think that we have made progress as a society, as a, collective society, but we still on our way to give it the space that it deserves, because back to what you're saying, is essential. Otherwise it's going to be a mountain of accumulation. So yeah, I'll let you continue. All of this, like, very inspiring and interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I use sport, and that's more of a physical. But it's the same for mental health. I mean, for mental health, it's exactly the same. I mean, if you just have your brain constantly under pressure, the performance will just degrade over time. So again, I use sport as an example, which is more physical health, but exactly the same thing holds true for mental health. That if you don't give your brain some time to supercompensate and get back to recharging the batteries and giving it time to get back to top performance levels, you'll see exactly the same thing. So I mean, it's not, I use sport as the example, but I mean it's equally relevant for mental health as it is for physical health. So next one I had on the list was diet. I think this is a super important one, and it's one that I think is often neglected by people, simply because a good diet often takes time. I prefer to cook myself rather than have finished meals, but it's one of those vicious circle things that if you don't have any time, then you don't have time to cook. You know, the more you're working, the less time you have to cook, the worse your diet gets, and then you're into a negative spiral. So, you know, this whole thing about diet, I do think is really important. I don't think you need to be super analytical about it. I think, you know, just have a balanced diet, be sensible. I do think, you know, I grew up in the culture in the UK, so this sort of drinking culture, it is a hard one to get out of, but I think, you know, anything that you can do to keep, you know, alcohol levels or smoking levels to a a moderate level will help you. As I say, diet is really, really important to have a balanced, mostly healthy diet. But again, you don't need to. I'm not a, you know, I'm not a big sort of promoter of vegan or vegetarian. If that suits you, that's great. But it's not essential to have a healthy diet to be vegan or vegetarian. I'm not, and I do my best to have a healthy diet as well. So, but it's definitely important. I mean, I know I've had days, you know, where you're hungover and you try to do the same level of performance at work or in sport. I mean, especially in sport, it's really painful with a hangover. But even in, you know, long meetings where you have to concentrate and you're hungover, it just doesn't work. I mean, it just is really, really tough, and you just feel you're at 50% performance. So I think, you know, being able, and it will come on to my next point, which is sort of sleep. You know, another really, really important one that tends to get forgotten. You know, diet and sleep for me go a little bit hand in hand, and they're all part of the recovery. You know, that if your sleep is not good, your body never recovers properly, and again, you're in this downward spiral of feeling more and more tired. Performance is, you know, gets worse and worse. So I think, you know, diet, sleep, and recovery are all sort of part of the same thing, but they require different approaches. So, you know, and sleep, and I'll be honest with you, sleep is something my entire life I've struggled with. I am so envious of these people whose head hits the pillow, they go to sleep, and then they wake up 8 hours later. I don't think I've ever done that. You know, I often wake up in the night and, you know, all the problems of the day are still churning through my mind, or, you know, what's coming up in the next few weeks that I need to get ready for is going through my mind, and sometimes really weird things going through my mind that, you know, you wouldn't expect. But, you know, it's just a sign that my brain hasn't turned off. It's not recovering. It's not super compensating. So sleep is one I really think is super important, and I know it to my own cost because I've never cracked the code. There are things I know that don't work. You know, if I drink alcohol before I go to bed, I know it's going to be a rough, not a rough night, but, you know, you're going to wake up 3 or 4 times in the night. Some things, you know, help a little bit. You know, I think not having, you know, iPads or mobile phones nearby helps, because otherwise, you know, there's always that. Just before you go to sleep, you have a quick look at your mails, and then suddenly there's an horrendous one with a huge problem. That's your good night's sleep gone. So I think, you know, there are a few tips and tricks that help a little bit, but I'll be honest, I know it's important because I've never cracked it, and you know, waking up feeling really tired is a really depressing way to start the day. So I think you know, sleep, diet, and this recovery time are all really important aspects to managing physical and mental health. Then I think the last one I had on the list was just, and I think this is a hard one for men, and I struggle with it as well, but, you know, regular health checkups. You know, they can be a bit embarrassing. They can be, you know, something's hard to find time for. You know, you in your busy schedule, you don't always put a health check as the top one, but I think it really is important. I think, you know, a yearly thorough checkup of everything, no matter how embarrassing it might be for you, it is really, really important, even if it's just for peace of mind. I think, or just tracking things. You know, sometimes there are things that slowly get worse over time as you get older, and if you don't have regular checkups, you don't notice, and then until it's too late, you know, whether it's cholesterol levels or blood pressure or you know, thickening of the arteries and things like this. You know, these are all things that happen slowly over time, or even weight increase or BMI shifts. All of these things are important to track, but I think a lot of people don't. Either they don't find time for it, or they don't see the need for it, or they just find it, embarrassing or a difficult topic that's easier to push back and back and back. So I would really recommend it. I mean, as I say, even if it's just for peace of mind that everything's fine and you don't need to worry about it, I think it's just something that makes sense, and it's not a big deal. I mean, it feels like a big deal when you're going there, but usually it's a couple of hours every year, and you get everything checked out, and then what you need to take care of, and what is fine. So that was sort of the last thing on my list of sort of eight things that I have over the years sort of learned are key things to physical health and mental health, and this balance between the pressures of work and yeah, physical and mental health.
Well, thank you so much, because it was a masterclass, and everything is kind of like intertwined, linked to each other. And it's great to hear this also from you, because back to the point, you're a reference, for many people. And look, all of the learnings that you gain, and you are giving this to us and to everyone that come across to this moment in time, for us to take in. Maybe we are not going to take in everything at once, but eventually it will all make sense, and it will all be connected, and it was like, oh, I heard this, and or maybe like it's an inspiration for us to take it straight away, and also to feel related. For example, sleep is something, it's a challenge that many people experience, but back to your point, you identify that maybe alcohol before sleep maybe is a no-go, but maybe some people are not there yet. Maybe the connection is not there. So it's trying to find out what are the triggers, and learn along the way to make the journey as best as possible. Dominic, thank you so much. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much for taking the time to go through, to condense really what you have learned throughout your experience. It was very inspiring, and it made me reflect a lot in a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we can take in, but if I had to summarize, if I can put a word to a moment that we just had, I would put it the word balance. How to keep that balance across many aspects of your life, like relationships, work, sport, diet. Really hard to attain, but I think that you gave a very brief, very comprehensive summary on how does that balance looks like within a high pressure environment. Because we tend to think that, well, I think that it is hard, to get a balance on top of your responsibilities, the high pressure that is always on. But it seems that it's possible. Back to what you are, just sharing with us. So thank you for that, and I'm pretty sure that this is going to, inspire many people, especially men, that we don't really tend to talk about it much very openly, to admit that we have a challenge, and we are working through it. It's not something that, unfortunately, it comes naturally. I'm very much invested into the topic, and it comes this thought like, oh, shall I be sharing this? The more and more I progress and I invest time into developing that, the better it comes. But it always, I don't know, for me, sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe it's a sign of weakness in, like, if I share this, but not really, it is not. But the perception, unfortunately, in my brain, has been like that. And lots of studies. I read an article from Harvard that, especially like us men, when we're looking at our mental health, we face many challenges, sometimes stigma, sometimes like, things at the background of our minds. But anyways, long story short, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing all of these wisdom learnings with us. I'm taking a lot in terms of learning, so thank you. And I'm pretty sure that many people that would come across to this, hopefully, will get inspiration either for now or maybe in 3 years, 10 years. It doesn't really matter. The point and the purpose of this is to provide support, provide inspiration, and that's available out there for whoever is needed. So thank you, Dominic, again for taking time. It was a pleasure. And again, it came up very naturally, so I'll be forever grateful for that. And thank you.
You're welcome, Marcus. And I maybe just so the last word on that is, of course, everybody's different. And that's something I also discovered. What works for me doesn't always work for someone else, and what works for someone else doesn't always work for me. So, it's really about just taking things, and maybe it's a scientist in me, but I always try things. If they don't work for me, then okay, they don't work for me. I'll try something else, and if that works for me, then I stick with it. But maybe that's something other people can look at what's worked for me. Some things will work for them, some things won't, but it's sort of, try a few things and see which ones help and which ones don't, and then you focus on the things that help. So, but everybody is different, and that's one of the challenges, I think, with physical health and mental health, is that we all have different triggers, we all have different ways of coping, we all have different capacities for either mental health or physical health issues. So that's the other key takeaway, is that really everybody is different, and you just need to find what works for you.
It's like more or less find your flow. What works for you, it's not going to work for everyone. So thank you for finishing in that. And again, it was so great to talk to you among everything, and also on the fact that you're a scientist and you also believe in that randomness. Not everything is okay, I need to do this and this and this to get there. There are some things in life that just come to you. Of course, we need to make the effort and put the time, but thank you for that. Thank you. I hope all of my other scientist friends will get to see this. But thank you, Dominic. Thank you. Have an amazing day, and thank you so much again for taking the time. See you next time.
Marcus, it was a pleasure. Bye bye.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye.